If you let it happen, it will never happen. Welcome back to Composition and its Allies. My name is Barney. I'm a classical composer, and this is a channel for composers as well as performers interested in composition. Orchestration for beginners is for anyone who wants to compose and finish their first orchestral work, and today I want to show you some strategies for actually getting it done. Let's begin. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I call the great lie. Okay, the great lie is something that's très courant, as we say in French. Okay, it runs throughout society, and it basically says, I do not have time. Okay, when it comes to orchestration, you're never going to find the time unless you force it into your life. Everything is going to conspire against you. You have family obligations. You may have to pick up the kids from work. You have to go to school. You have to make money. Everything is going to come ahead of composition unless you absolutely force it. It must be forced in. Okay? So we're going to talk about how to force it in, as well as documentation, which is really important to holding yourself accountable. So, personal anecdote, when I was living in France, I lived in France for 5 years to get better primarily at harmony, but I also took orchestration classes and a few classes because I wanted a proper education in, the technique aspect of composition. And when I was there, at first, I was doing a lot of harmony. Okay, I was maybe doing 20, 30 hours a week of harmony. I was doing 10 hours a week of orchestration. I also had to work probably 20, 30 hours a week. So I was jam-packed. I didn't have time for composition. But at a certain point, I realized, okay, all the technique is great. This is great. It's all sur le bon chemin. It's in French. Everything is going in the right way. But I'm never going to finish my piece unless I force it in. Okay. Now I had composed the piece in America, but after my training in France, I was like, okay, it needs to be reorchestrated. Okay. But you have to actually put in the time. So what I had to do at first is I had to schedule it first thing in the morning. Okay. I know that's the only guaranteed time I'm going to have. You may think in your head, okay, I can do it here, I can do it there, but day after day after day, you may find, in fact, the only time, at least for me, was first thing in the morning. So maybe 30 minutes to an hour of a guaranteed time, and then you can play with the other time. Important aspects of this is you have to have raw honesty with yourself. Okay, you're going to have to look at data, and because in your head we think, oh, I can do it. Again, it's just something vague, and it's in French you say ambigu. It's not set in stone, but you have to be clear. Okay, I know for sure for myself at that point in my life, if I start in the morning, that is something I can maintain every single day, even if it's only 30 minutes or an hour. The next thing I want to talk about is sacrifices. So when it comes to forcing your first orchestral work and actually getting it done, you're going to have to think very, very practically. Okay, you cannot think, oh, well, maybe, but based on, you have to be super, super practical. So for example, let's say I had to leave the house at 7:30 because I have to go to work. Okay, well, that means that starting at 6:30 a.m., I'm going to have to start getting ready for work. So that means I cannot compose for that time. Even if in your head, on paper, it seems like you have all this free time to compose, but it is not true. That time is blocked off. We say in French, c'est bloqué for things that you have to do, right? You have to brush your teeth, you have to take a shower, so you don't actually have that time available. So you have to be really practical. Okay, so that means if I need to start getting ready for work at 6:30 a.m., that means that I have to end composition by 6:20 a.m. What do you mean? Okay, because by time 6:20 a.m. comes along, my mind is wandering because I start getting anxiety. I have to start getting ready. My day is starting to manifest. Okay, I have to make it happen. So you have to already be self-aware enough that I know I don't have those 10 minutes anymore. Okay, so that 10 minutes instead can be used for wrapping up. Okay, I'm going to do a summary of what I achieved today. I'm going to, put my papers away. I'm going to write some ideas of what I want to do tomorrow. There is some planning that you can do, but the creative aspect or the real hustle aspect is no longer present. Okay, so therefore, let's say I know at what time I can actually wake up. That means I'm going to have 5:30 a.m. to 6:20 a.m., which is 50 minutes, okay, to compose. That was theoretically, okay? And of course, you need to budget time before that if you need to eat breakfast or do coffee or all these other things, okay? So the key here is you have to force it and you have to be really, really smart. It cannot be just like, okay, I let it happen. If you let it happen, it will never happen. The next thing I want to introduce to you is something really, really basic, but it helps enormously, or at least it really helped for me to complete my first symphony, Help Us on the Way for Orchestra. So you need to document, okay? I find this especially helpful if day after day I just can't find the time. Again, it is a conspiracy theory. It's not true. You can find the time, but you're going to have to force the time. Everything is going to work against you to tell you, oh, it's okay, take some time off, don't stress yourself. No, no, no. You have to stress yourself. You have to make it happen. Unless you're so disciplined that you don't have to do it in the first place and you just are already doing it, in which case you're probably not watching this video. So one thing I really recommend is to write down how many hours a day that you're composing, okay? I first did this in France because I was working a lot of hours, 20, 30 hours at a job, and I started to notice that I wasn't getting my work done as much work. And I was like, I moved all the way to France. I need to get a certain level, okay? So my first year in France, I was doing maybe 20, 30 hours a week of just harmony, okay, because it was that important to me. And then I had to fit in some other things. And when I had that chart, I started to see, okay, I'm doing this 20 hours a week of harmony, okay? It feels like I'm not doing enough, but that is certainly a lot, okay? Another reason you can do that chart is you may notice, oh, I didn't compose today. Oh, that means I have to compose tomorrow. Or, oh, I didn't compose yesterday. That means I have to compose tomorrow, okay? So the reason why we do the documentation is you have real data, because as composers, sometimes you're going to have ideas in your head that, oh, I'm getting a lot done, or I'm not getting anything done. And you have to be able to just look at something that's like more scientific, shall we say, so you can make accurate decisions. Another thing I want to talk about is what I call false optimism. So you need to look at patterns, okay, of when you're actually getting work done, which is why I recommend the documentation, and you have to bend to reason. So, for example, when I was still doing my studies in Paris, France, there was a period of time, it took me a while to kind of accept the reality, but I would have like a late dinner, I'd start cooking around 8 or 8:30, I wouldn't eat till 9, 9:30, and then afterwards, my brain was cooked, no pun intended, okay? So my brain, I could not really do any orchestration or composition. Maybe I could watch a YouTube video, but I could not do anything really creative or productive. But in my head, it seemed on paper, I have all this time. I have 2 hours. I have this, that, and the third. But continually, day after day after day, I would, go cook, eat. I'd have distractions like drama, people I had to interact with in the dormitory. And then when I go to orchestrate, I can't do anything, and then I act shocked and like guilty that I'm not getting this piece done, when just the practical scientific matter of is just I cannot get it done at that time of night based on the environment I was in, or the life I was living at the time. So therefore, what I had to do is I had to say, well, I know in the morning I can do it. So then what I had to do is, okay, I'll go to bed a little bit earlier, relax, and then I wake up earlier and invest that time all in one session. Another thing that can be really helpful is to look at the time required to complete certain passages. This is a little bit difficult, and it's hard to do in a scientific manner because there's all these different factors. But for example, if you have a tutti passage, right, tutti passages take forever. So on the screen here, we can see a tutti passage from one of the climaxes from the E-flat major section of my first symphony, Hauptsache for Orchestra, and knowing what I know now, if I had this section and I had to orchestrate something like this, I would budget probably 2 to 3 days of 3 to 4 hours of work per day. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, but maybe that's not even enough time to factor in like prepping the other sections, setting up the paper, and all these other things. But when you start like noticing, okay, how long something takes, then you can make better estimations. What I find is many times we don't know how much something is going to take. So I thought, okay, I'll finish revising my orchestra piece in, a couple weeks. Nope, took, 6 months at the minimum, right? The final thing I want to mention is there's an existential problem, and that's how you're going to get your first orchestral work performed. You cannot rely, okay, I'll win a competition. How are you going to win the competition? Do you have an inside league that's going to get you a guaranteed performance? Another thing to mention is a lot of competitions, especially in America, they are not upfront about what they're looking for. So you may submit your composition and it's excellent. Maybe it's the best prepared, it's very professional looking, it's excellent, but there is already a predetermined winner, or they have certain categories or certain profiles they're looking for, and it's not in your control. Therefore, you need to have some kind of real, like, what is the nuclear option if I do not win the competition, if I can't get it performed? What am I going to do to actually get it performed? Thank you for watching. If you want to take action, if you want to get ready for orchestration, I'd recommend watching a video on my website, which is called How Harmony Prepares You for Orchestration. I wish you the best of luck with your first orchestral work. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.